going to be doing a tutorial this evening on how to do more advanced applique and reverse applique, because you can put the same things in the same pieces. So a lot of folks get intimidated by applique and reverse applique, and that's why I did the first two videos on basics, on how to start, because it's important to get started the right way. But this one is going to go into a little more in depth. What I'm doing right now is changing out my scalpel blade, just so that it's nice and sharp when we start. This particular piece we're going to work on is a sugar skull. It's complicated. It looks intimidating, but it's not as bad as you think. So what I'm going to do is trim up the piece to begin with. Now if you have a projector, obviously you can project whatever you like. It's much more efficient instead of cutting everything out from paper. But I don't have a projector, so we're going to do this the old school way, as it were. So first things first, let's get the sugar skull taped down. I am using almost, I think all of this is from My Punk Embroidery. It's my favorite vinyl shop online, although there are many and lots of them have different offerings. But this is the, let me think, which one's this one called? Fluidity line. This is the white fluidity. I like it because it's textured, sort of, and it has a really nice marbling to it, so it makes it more interesting than a flat white. Plus, it's super easy to work with. I have given My Punk Embroidery so much money over the years, and I do not regret it, because they're a great company, and they're super fast, and they always ship my stuff. So what we're going to do to start with is I am cutting out the general shape here of the skull. So we're just going to go along the outside. If it takes you longer than it takes me, that's cool. Because when you start out, it's better to go slow and get it right than it is to try to get through it quickly. I spend a lot of time cutting out things. This is generally my business, is making applique and reverse applique by hand for custom bags. So I might not be the best person in the world at this, but I'm alright. I'm pretty good. It sounds a little egotistical to say it out loud sometimes, but it's true all the same. And I want other folks to be able to do this kind of stuff too. Because I don't like it when people get so intimidated by stuff like this. If you lose your place while you're cutting, sometimes it's just easy to lift up a corner and see where it is that you've started or stopped. A lot of going into this kind of work is being able to adjust the patterns too, because not everything that you find is going to be A+ perfect for what you need it to be. So we have to change the size of the lines, we have to change the size of any of the scale or pattern to fit it onto a bag. Just be aware that the smaller you go, the more detail that you're going to lose, because there's only so many fine lines that you can cut the way you're cutting things before it gets lost. And you can definitely sew lines on, or you can embroider them on, or anything like that. However, there is a limit to what size you can do things. Like, I can do this one a little bit smaller than it is right now, but I thought for the purposes of teaching, it should be nice and large. This would fit on the side of several of the larger handbags, so it's okay. Okay, there is this one cut out. So what I'm going to do now, just keeping the chat room open now, because if folks have questions, now's a good time to come ask them. Oh, things get stuck under things. The fun fun part about doing this too is that you don't use nearly as much vinyl because it's almost always small bits that you're cutting off of things. So I have an entire assortment of small bits that I have kind of stashed off to the side for projects because you don't have to use that much when you're just doing little things. Okay, so now we have a basic skull. What I'm going to do now that I have it out of the main piece is start to cut out some of these details here along the sides of the face and all of that. A lot of the trick of applique is layering, to layer it all out so it looks nice and pretty and it has multiple dimensions to it. It's not just going to be flat. So we cut out a lot of individual pieces. What I'm going to do right now, once I get this taped back down, is cut out some of these little detail parts. And you can make it however you want. That's the fun part about doing this, is that it can make whatever colors or shapes or sizes. You don't have to follow this one, but I'm going to for the purposes of teaching right now. So, I'm going to cut out the little pieces here by the mandible. Right there. Then I'm going to cut out these little bits here because I am not making that a separate color on top. If I want to put different colors underneath, this would become reverse applique. Or it could just be the color of the bag showing through. All depends on what you want it to do. And yes, it is pretty time consuming to do work like this. However, I think the results are worth it. I really enjoy this kind of work. It can be tedious and can be time consuming, but the end result is just super cool. And it's very unique. And because it's unique, folks can get what they want put on anything, really. I've done quite a few bags that are hobby specific or sports specific or pet specific. I've done pet portraits. Those are a lot of fun. Also sort of stressful, but pretty fun. Translating images like that can be a little bit stressful, but we all get a bit of artistic license because we're working in one medium versus another. Like, you can't put all of the lines and stuff that people would draw onto a page into your sewing, but you can get kind of close. And don't feel bad if you're not as fast, because that takes time and practice. I can do about 3 bags a week with, depending on how complicated it's going to be. Like super complex bags, I can do 1 because it takes all of the time to cut everything out plus all of the time to sew it down, which can be just as time consuming. I'm gonna cut out the little nose piece here because I don't want it falling out on me. I don't want to cut it down yet. These are just little embroidery scissors that I use. I highly recommend a pair of precision scissors if you're doing this kind of work, because you've got to get into little tiny spaces and dig out all of these little marks that you have made with your scalpel. So it's always better to have a really small, sharp pair of scissors. I don't find these to be worth sharpening, like sending them to a sharpener. So I just buy new ones when they kind of go dull. My big scissors I get sharpened though. That would be really weird to buy nice scissors and not get them sharpened. I send mine back to the manufacturer of the scissors. I don't use like traveling services or knife sharpeners or anything like that. I just find the results are more reliable. Okay, there's those. We're gonna get these little dots up here on top too. So, when you're looking at pieces like this, if you find them overwhelming, I think the easiest way to look at them is just one cut at a time. Because you can see I've got quite a bit done right now, and there's a lot of component parts that are going on here. But it doesn't take that long once you just do it one piece at a time. So, getting all these little comma mark looking deals here. Nearly there. You notice that I'm moving the piece around a lot. That is important because you want to make sure that you're getting the right cut and the right marks where they're supposed to be. So let's get this fit. I like doing the different layers because I think it gives the piece more depth. So while it does take more time and it does make it so that you have to cut more pieces, I think the end result is really cool. So I like doing that. That's why a lot of these can't be done on cutting machines, because a cutting machine will only give you the very basic outlines of shapes. So if you're doing things with like multiple layers, the cutting machine isn't going to do that. It's not going to cut out all of the bits that you want cut out. Now it can do all the outlines on it, and that's really cool, and it can look really neat like that. Not dogging on cutting machines. However, if you want multiple layers, you have no choice but to hand cut. There's no other way to do that that I know of. So right now I'm going to cut out these little hearts. These can all be reverse applique. That is how I do a lot of the small bits, because it's easier to go around the outside than it is to lay down little tiny pieces and they won't stay taped. I've learned that the hard way. There's only so much you can do with like little itty bitty pieces. If you're patient, sometimes you can get like eyeball dots sewn down, or you can do them with just the line work itself of your sewing machine. However, there is a distinct limit to the size and the thinness of what you can cut out. So that's important to look at when you're picking pieces that you can cut out. I chose this one because it has big bold lines, and that makes it much easier to use as a template to cut out. It makes it easier to also just to print it out, and I don't have to worry too much about being too close to a line or making things too small or whatever. Okay. These more complicated pieces, people get kind of bogged down in how many cuts there are, and oh my gosh, how do I fit all this together? And it honestly goes quicker than you think when you're just taking your time. If you notice, I already pulled a bunch of colors here. Sugar skulls are always very colorful. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm not doing, I'm gonna do a reverse applique of the little keyhole eyes, and then we'll pick another color to do the little ruffles. So right now what I'm doing is I am going to cut out the hearts here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this template to the color that I want underneath the heart eyes, which will not be white. Some of the matchy-matchy stuff just doesn't have to happen on pieces like this. Like, and some you want to stay within, you know, the color rainbow palette wheel matching things, that kind of stuff. Not so much for the sugar skull themes. You just want bold. Obviously you don't want anything to clash, but the bold colors are what's going to make this look really nice. If you notice, I have my pinky finger down on the piece as I'm cutting. It helps stabilize what I'm doing. That's really the only reason that I do it. Okay, so we're going to save these two heart pieces right there, because I'm going to cut out the keyhole once we get the piece nailed down. So, and if you mess up a little bit when you're doing with the scalpel, you can always clean it up with your little scissors when you're taking pieces out of it, which is what I'm doing right now. Just gonna cut off these pieces because the scalpel doesn't get everything. All right, let's do this. And if you are doing this with a printer, print multiples of whatever piece you're going to cut out, because it's going to take multiple layers, and some of the layers aren't going to cooperate with each other. So you're going to have to start with a brand new clean piece of paper. As you can see, there's only so much that I can cut off one piece of paper before it's all mangled up and I have to start again. What I'm doing right now is I'm just pulling out some of these little pieces. This is the part I don't usually put on the videos because it's very time consuming, but since this is a tutorial, y'all need to see all of the steps. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to clean up the little fuzzies that are left on the piece, and I'm going to clean up the edges a little bit. You can also burn these. You just have to be careful with light colored fabric. I'll show you in just one second. It's controlled burning. Like how you would melt the ends of webbing straps or your zippers. All this does is clean up the edges of where you've cut without having to go through and hand trim it all. You can let fire do the work for you. I mean, to a certain degree. Just don't go nuts. Because we are working with vinyl, it will just melt. So, quick bursts, in and out. Alright, I will show you how I do this. So, this is just a regular cigarette lighter. Nothing fancy pants. Just take it along the edges, and as you can see, it's all melted. It's all pulled back from the little edges there. So, I just do it again, and it'll clean up all the edges. A little bit of fire saves you a little bit of time. True story. So it just means that you don't have to spend quite as much time trimming up all of the edges, because we already spent so much time cutting it. A little bit of help there is fine. Just be careful and go from the back, because otherwise, if you go from the front, you have a higher likelihood of melting something you don't want to melt and leaving residue. There will be residue like burn marks if you hold it on there too long, and nobody needs that stress. So go from the back and only hold it there for a few seconds. You'll see the edges start to melt a little bit. Now if you're using like a woven back, it does the same thing. It just, like, this one has a different backing. This is like a soft woven back. This is like a fuzzy back to it. Either way, it will still burn the edges a little bit, and it will make sure that you have nice clean edges for when you go to sew it down. Otherwise, what you're going to have left is a bunch of fuzzies. And it just doesn't work. Not in the long run anyways. I don't like the way it looks anyways. I think it looks a little bit sloppy. And maybe that's my own personal hang up, but I can't have the little fuzzy edges laying around. You can obviously just do what I did and kind of cut it off, but I don't think that works as great. Okay, so we got a bunch more here, but I'm going to keep on cutting so that y'all can see how this piece comes together. I'm not going to fill out all of the holes here. I am going to put this back on and work on the teeth a little bit though. The good part about doing this with the paper is that you can just plop it right back on where it was and you can see where all the edges will line up. So that's helpful. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is you can see like the line work on the teeth here is really cool, but I can sew this part and this part on. What I'm going to do is make more defined teeth on there. And I'm not going to make it go all the way up because like I said, with line drawings, you can do stuff like that. With this, we need to be practical and have things that we know that we can use. So I don't have to cut out each individual tooth to give the appearance of teeth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this center line and I'm going to go about halfway up and then I'm going to come back down. So what's going to happen is there will be a very thin line in the middle where it will look like the teeth are separating. And a lot of this is like artistic license kind of thing. If you want to cut out each individual tooth, absolutely do that. You can do that. I don't like doing teeth. I've done quite a few skulls over the years and I find them to be tedious. So I will do a lot to not have to cut out a bunch of teeth. Now, when I go to sew this down, I will sew the whole tooth, even though I've only cut part of it out. So we can make the appearance of a lot of teeth and make sure that the teeth are all defined and you can see them all with your thread. It works really well, actually. I think it's one of the more time-saving ways that I've found to do skull teeth, which is a very strange thing to say, but there it is all the same. I'm just going to, sometimes when I'm cutting difficult things it's hard to talk while I do it, just because I do still have to concentrate at this. I might be good at what I do, but it still requires concentration to do it. So if I stop talking in the middle of a sentence, that's why. Once you do enough of these, it kind of becomes second nature to look for the little shortcuts and little line works that you can manipulate and all that. But when you're just starting out, sometimes that can be a little intimidating. Oh, my chat went off. Hang on one second. There we go. Nobody's in here asking me questions today. That's okay though. I bet I have some lurkers lurking around. Alright. I will export this video to YouTube later for folks in so they can see them on some of the other groups that I'm in. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and pull out a few more of these, and then I will pull out the middle section of the teeth so you can see what I did. It looks really cool. and it's not nearly as much work as cutting out every single individual tooth. And some of this will just have to be cleaned up. All right, let's pull out the separating panels here. So when you're working with fake leather, vinyl, whatever you want to call it, some of these you can actually pull a lot more on. The fluidity line is not something that I generally pull on a lot, just because it has the fuzzies on the back and it tends to just pull off some of the fuzz instead of the actual material that I want to come off. So learning your materials and what they can and can't do. Like sometimes you can pull pieces out and it's fine, but other vinyls you cannot do that with because it will just rip or just stretch and you really haven't accomplished anything time saving at all. So some of these pieces like this that get more complicated, you have to kind of reduce some of the line work. You have to make that kind of decision on, oh, do I really want this? Oh, do I really need this? Because sometimes it's just not possible to do everything the same way that you see it drawn on there, because like I said, the mediums are completely different. So whenever you're doing this kind of work, and if you want to make the teeth more interesting, you can cut off pieces and corners and whatever, so that they have a chipped tooth or they're missing a tooth. Those always make the pieces much more interesting and unique, because when you're doing work like this, it's usually like person by person. I would not try to sell work like this like in bulk for, you know, like festivals or markets or whatever, because it is so time intensive. You can do little simple pieces, you can do little bits of things, but for like the really complicated stuff, I think it's better to take those pieces on commission on a person by person basis, because you know that they're super into it, because it's really hard to do work like this and try to pick out what is really going to be on trend. I mean, yeah, we got guides and all that, but for work like this that takes so much time to do, I think it's better to make sure that everyone's going to be super excited with your work, because that's the thing that they wanted. I've done several pieces of like D20s or things like that that I know will sell, but they're pretty simple compared to stuff like this. Like, okay, I think we have a good idea here. So this is the part that I've done here on the bottom, right? This is not the full teeth cutouts. So we have, that's what it looks like there. This is what it looks like here. And when I cut out the top part, I'll go halfway up there too. But if you want to, like I said, just kind of cut bits off of the teeth, because teeth are not perfect unless they're like veneers or something. But on a skull, if you want to make it more interesting, you can do all those kinds of things. And that way, even if people like the same designs, like if sugar skulls sell for you really, really well, right? If sugar skulls sell, that's great. You can make them all individuals. People appreciate that, like that their bag doesn't look exactly like someone else's who wanted that design too. Because I have done repeat designs, and by the nature of doing handmade work, obviously nothing's going to be exactly the same, because we are not machines. But you can personalize or individualize all of your work like this. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is going to increase some of the gap in some of these teeth, and I'm going to round them off a little bit. This is part of the trick of doing some of this, is just to make it more realistic when you're working in vinyl, obviously. It's not terribly realistic. But people have gaps between their teeth, right? People have missing teeth or chipped teeth. So to make our skulls slightly more authentic and not like it's a really nice line drawing, I am cutting off some of these little corners. And yes, you will have bits of everything everywhere. My husband calls it my confetti. And it's true. I can't deny it. I have bits of everything everywhere. Not just vinyl, but like string and thread and all that. I like the look of the rounded off teeth as opposed to perfectly square teeth. Like I said, make them a little more interesting. Because hopefully, by the time we're gone, we won't have square teeth. They'll be worn down because we're old. Right? Right. Awesome. Okay. Alright, so we've got the base down here. Got our teeth. I'll pull out the hearts later, but don't really want to take the time because this is going to be a long one anyways. This is not a simple piece. So there's our skull, and we'll have a few more cutouts here on the sides and everything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this still. We can still use it for a few more things before I have to switch to a new one. I am going to get, one moment, this orange. It's a color shifty orange. This is called Simply Orange. I try to keep the labels on these things so I know which ones I need to reorder, but don't always succeed. So you can see there's already like a little piece missing there. So what I'm going to do for this, the orange is going to be the like lacy cutout here. And I am not doing these cutouts that are like the black line works on the outside. I don't think it's necessary. So what I'm going to do here is make these little lace eyeballs. And then I'm going to cut out the pink, and then I'm going to get the pink hearts that are going to go in the eyes. Again, color choices are completely up to you, but if you're doing sugar skulls, go bold. The more angles and lines you have to cut, the longer it will take you to do it. So each one of these little individual ruffles is going to take a second. Things that people pay attention to the most when you're doing this kind of work. Crooked lines are always very noticeable. Like if you're trying to do like, I don't know, geometric bag. That one, and circles, because everyone knows what they look like. And it's not very fair, because those are very difficult shapes to do in the best of times. But when you're doing work like this, I've found that those are the two that stand out the most. So perfect circles, like if you're trying to do bubbles or something like that, use a hole punch. Hand cutting them is just nightmarish. So I have a set of leather punches that I use to do like circles. There's also quilting dies that you can use for circles, which again is much easier than trying to do it by hand or even using a piece of paper to do it. It's just very difficult. Those are my recommendations for those ones. A lot of quilting and card templates are really good for this stuff. In the applique, the basic applique and the reverse applique videos that I've done, I use the star as a paper template actually, but it works because I don't have to try and get perfectly straight lines with my ruler. I can just let the template do that. I highly recommend them for like basic shapes. And get yourself a nice big quilting ruler for any kind of line work. It's much easier to see when your line is crooked like that. Okay, almost with these two. Please put any questions you might have in the comments. Because I know folks watch these and I'm like, how are you doing this? So I thought I would try to talk y'all through this. As you can see, it's a lot of tape and a lot of patience. That's really all applique and reverse applique are. Patience and tape. So that you can get the lines to do what you want them to do. And then it's just layering it on there and sewing it down. Which, you know, sewing it down is its own skill set. But it's not that bad. Okay, so this is a thinner back, so what I'm doing is just ripping this out of here. Because I know how this vinyl behaves. I know that it's not going to tear in half or give me big old snags. So, as you can see, a lot of doing these little ruffles, or even like smaller lines, it makes it perforated. So if you have a nice firm vinyl that will stand up to you pulling on it, you can just pull it right out of there like it's perforation. This one's going to be difficult after I just said that. Always the way, isn't it? Alright, so there's our two little ruffly hearts. I'm gonna roll this one back up so that it's not in the way. The other thing I would highly recommend is making sure that you have a clean workspace, or at least a big open space, so that you can get all of this together. I'm just going to use fire again on this part. Yeah, that's much better. Because you see right here, there's like all these little fuzzies hanging off there. It's very irritating to me personally. So I just set it on fire and get it off there. And if there's little parts hanging off that you don't like, just take your little scissors, precision scissors of some kind. Precision scissors, that is not easy to say. Like embroidery scissors, to get the little ends off. Otherwise, when you sew it down, it's gonna look sloppy. See that? Kind of flared up when I was doing it, but the front's perfectly fine. And you can always just make a little more pronounced ruffle. There's always room in that, unless it's like something super precise. So it's okay. There we go. Okay. So this is going to get interesting because what we're doing is going to put some depth on here. Let's see. I'm going to put this wrapper back on here. Let's do that. Okay. So this is going to get pushed down a little bit, right? And you don't have to do it like this. I can leave this off and just put this on here. We're going to do pink for the eye holes here. I'm just going to cut off a couple pieces because this is going to be the reverse applique part. It's going to go right underneath. Now, let's clean up these little eye holes here. Yeah, all melted nice. This is a risky thing and not everyone does it, but I do. So feel free to ignore me and just trim it with your scissors. This one's going to have to be anyways because that corner of the heart is not exactly round. There we go. There. A lot of the work that goes into all of this is just making minor adjustments and having an eye for detail. It's not any different than like checking your seams or anything like that. So there we go. Sometimes it stinks when you do that, so if you have sensitivity to burning plastic, might not be your gig. Okay, so here's how I'm going to do the reverse applique on this. I'm going to put down some double-sided tape, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to trace out the keyholes for the eyes. So here's how I'm going to do that. This is 1/8" double-sided tape. It is the thing I use the most for this. This work is the double-sided tape because it holds everything in place. Nothing's going to slip around while you're sewing or cutting. And that is very important when you're doing the layering. Just gotta stick that extra bit up there. So we're going to pull this off. All right. Just going to line this up like this. When you're doing reverse applique, I always put this piece down and then put the applique backer on top of it because it keeps things from wrinkling. Wrinkles are a problem when you do work like this. Okay, so what I'm doing here, sorry, I'm used to sitting back in my chair and I can't do that. What I'm doing here is just cutting out on the basic outline of the place that I want backed with this pink. It's like a magenta. Some scraps are too small to save, and that's okay. I don't save everything. And so now that we have our double-sided tape down, I don't have to worry as much about going the wrong way. Alright, what I'm gonna do right now is just cut with the scalpel on the inside here so I don't accidentally put it in the wrong place. Alright, let's get this down. Okay. There. Alright. So then what I'm going to do is trim up this nose hole here. You get to say a lot of interesting things when you do applique work. I'm going to trim up the nose hole. The noise you hear behind me is my cats running around like cats. I need my husband, who is hopefully listening, to get the spammer out of the chat, please. That would be really nice of you, dear. He's supposed to be moderating the channel. And I don't really need spam in here. There we go. So, now we have two little heart eyes. Cute, right? Alright. Now what I'm doing, we are going to put the pieces that we cut out back on here. And cut out the keyholes. Now, because it's double-sided tape on the other side, it's okay that this isn't taped super great. It'll hold it. If you were wondering where I got the double-sided tape from, that is from Wizardry Stitches. They have really nice double-sided tape, which is a thing I never thought I would say. How do I have opinions on double-sided tape? But here we are. So, I'm going to cut this out. I have a feeling I might have mucked up that orange a little bit because I made it a single solid piece. So, that's okay. You know why? Because I can fix it. That's the great thing about doing this, is that it's rare that you've ruined something so completely, especially when you do it in layers. When you're doing these things in layers, it's much, much more difficult to muck the thing up so bad that you have to start all over again. Which, fair. Sometimes you do. It's just part of being a creative person. Sometimes you just got to start over. But when you do it in layers like this, if you have one part right, you can get other parts right. And if one little bit doesn't work out, then you can either eliminate it from the design, which I've done before, or you can just make another one of that specific design element without having to start completely over. So, come on. Come on. There we go. Sometimes it's hard to maneuver your scissors into these little tiny spaces, and it takes a little bit of maneuvering. And sometimes you have to talk to your scissors, and that's okay too. I don't know anybody who doesn't, really. And if you happen to cut something that you weren't supposed to cut, that's okay too. Because we can just change the shapes and sizes a little bit. Alright, so what I am going to do now is fix this. Yeah, because I do kind of want the little doily look happening here. But what I'm going to do, advanced techniques. What I'm going to do is put this in here, and then I'm just going to lightly go over it and hopefully not cut the thing underneath. Let's see, is that on this one? This one is this one. Okay. Yes. So what I'm going to do is do that real quick here. The jingling is the cats. Crazy cats. Thank you, dear. No more spammers in the channel. Alright. Let's just go over this like this. So when we, yeah, I think it's probably going to be easier to do it this way. When you have to do the small work like this, sometimes it's just easier to do it one way or the other. So instead of risking that piece, we're going to do it this way. I still have to figure this stuff out on the fly too. It's alright. No brush. We've already done the complicated part, which is the outside wrinkles. Just stab myself. I don't think it's going to bleed though. Fun fact, the scalpel cuts heal way quicker than regular cuts because they're so sharp. That's a thing you know now. And I don't think anyone's going to be surprised at how I know it. Yeah, it happens. I haven't done like anything silly, dangerous for a while, but it has happened that I have cut myself before. However, like I said, scalpel cuts heal better. They heal clean. See, I bet you didn't come in here today to learn it. Think you're going to learn anything about that. So, we are getting closer to doing some of the flowers here. Basically the point of this whole video today was to give you an idea of how to get started with this. Obviously, you can do any kind of work that you want in this medium. However, it's cute. It'll make it easier if you have an idea of how the process works. I have plenty of other videos on when I'm working on other people's pieces for commissions, so you can see how that all works. However, sometimes it's nice to just have one piece where I'm explaining what I'm doing the entire time as I'm going along. So we've got our little heart eyes here, which is really cute. And I'm going to cut the other side out here. Oh, starting to pull a little bit here. I might need to change my blade. When you're working with scalpel blades or X-Acto blades, whatever you prefer. I like scalpel blades because they're cheaper. However, to each their own. When it starts to drag across the material, it's time to change your blade. That's just general facts. Because otherwise you're going to risk damaging your material or damaging the template that you're using if you're using paper or like a fabric thing or something. Whatever you're using, unless it's a projector, will kind of be damaged by the blade drag. There we go. I got that out before I was trying to find my line there. This kind of work is very hard on your eyes, so make sure that you have enough light in your workspace. And if you need magnifiers, please use them. It's better than having eye strain, which I do pretty often. And when you're starting to strain a bunch, it's time to stop. There we go. So, as you can see, this part here, I will double side tape this down here in just a minute, but we have our cute little doily eye holes here. Those are adorable. But, let's switch gears for just a minute. As you can see, this is the process. We're just going to layer on the component parts. So, cut out these greens, and this in whatever color you want the flowers to be, and you can put these along the sides. And then we put it all together, and we sew it all together with whatever backer you want on there. That's fine. You can pick whatever colors you like. This is the ones that I have left. However, I know that folks sometimes don't know how to layer a piece. So let me grab... I don't think I have another one printed and ready to go. So one moment, please, while I decide... Oh, I do have some. Okay. This is some of my extras of other pieces that I've done. So basically when you're looking for pieces that you're going to do, whether it's cute or dark or whatever, knowing which pieces to cut out to make the layers is important. So I'm going to find you one, hopefully. That's not going to be a giant pain. Maybe. All of these are from other pieces that I've done, and they're extras because sometimes folks want something that they saw somebody else have. There we go. We'll do these. This is cute. Okay. These are just little sample bits that I've done. You can change the sizes or whatever, but here is how I would go about layering these pieces. Cute little critters, right? Yeah. So, this part, the whole line can be cut out at once. And you can sew down these arms here. So, whole line cut out, and then we can do the mane that goes around the face. And then you can do the little details. Like, these should be enlarged to work with, probably, unless you're much better at this than I am. And that's possible. Definitely possible. I am not the world's most perfect applique person. Never gonna say that. But you should consider which lines that you're gonna thicken before you do it. So, if I was doing this piece, thicken up that lion's tail, right? Make the monkey's tail thicker. You can draw those lines on there at any point if you're using pieces of paper. Thicken up the monkey's tail, because that's going to be really, really hard to tape down and sew. So what you have to look at when you're doing this is, how can it sew down? How much better? What do I need to change? Right? So our little elephant friend here has a tail. That would definitely have to be much thicker if you're going to sew that down. Now, it doesn't have to be as thick as like the lion's tail or the monkey's tail, because it's short. It won't bend that much when you try to sew it down, but it should be thicker than what it is. And if you want to put the different colors on here, you can change any of the colors that you want, but you need to look at the line work and how it's going to sew down, right? So all of these little tiny cute little tails that they have on here are not going to sew down well, because they will bend as you try to sew them down, no matter how much you have them taped. Years of doing this has shown me that these kinds of things are what you need to look at before you get started to modify whatever design that you've chosen, or wherever you found it from. It doesn't really matter. But these kinds of things, these curves here, those are hard to get to stay in that true curve that it is right now. So when you take your pen and we want to just thicken it a little, you can leave it cute and, you know, little cute curly Q here, but it has to be thicker so that you can at least put some piece of tape in all of this so that it stays straight or in the shape that you need it to be. Really thin wispy lines that you have cut out of vinyl will warp, and you will have not a good result at the end if you try to either A, not tape it, or B, make it so thin that you can't tape it. So you have to be aware of those kinds of things when you're doing work like this. If you notice this kind of thing here that I'm doing, every piece of this can be taped down. And it has to be, because when I go to sew it, when I go to sew it, I have to be able to A, do the outline, and B, make sure that it's not moving all over the place. So what you pick for your designs matters just as much as how you're cutting it. You have to be able to pick designs that are going to translate well no matter what you're doing. Let me grab one more piece and I can show you a different design. Okay, I'm going to show you one that looks a little deceptive. Okay, this is a computer circuit board print that I did for like a technology bag, kind of. This looks impossible, right? It isn't, because all you have to do is cut these straight lines and then take your hole punch and knock out these ends. Obviously, you have to eliminate some of these in between. Look how little space is left in between some of these. You're never going to be able to get to sew between those. That's not going to happen. So if you want to do these kinds of things, do this one, this nice little curvy one here, and then do every other one after that, right? So it's not going to be as compact. It's not going to be as neatly put together here, but you're going to have space in between that is not going to warp as you start to sew down and cut. Because all of these little spaces here is going to be where you have to sew, right? So this is an infinitely doable pattern. I've done it before. You can do this too if you know which parts of it you're going to have to get rid of and which parts are going to have to be edited. And that's part of the learning process, right? That's part of growing as what you're doing. Is just learning what works and what doesn't, because you're frustrated and you want to throw your sewing machine out the wall because all of this is warping. Because when we're doing designs that are like technology or line work, it has to be crisp and precise. Like, you can leave this one in here for sure, this little one, because you have all of this room around it. I think it will definitely work. But when you look at like super narrow gaps, like right here and right here, see that right there? Can you sew around that if you cut this out? The answer is probably no, not without it looking a little bit sloppy around the edges. But I would definitely use a hole punch, like a leather punch, to get rid of this bit, so you don't have to cut that. You just have to cut the lines and then knock out the holes at the end. It's more efficient. That's what I've learned doing stuff like this. Let's look. This is one of my favorite designs. I use it all the time. My sunflower. This one is so simple to cut out, and it looks really pretty when it's done, because all you have to do is cut out the middle and all of these little petals and these, and you can swap the colors for these too. But this one is a really good design to pick because it's big, bold lines, right? Big, bold lines. It's big enough to sew through. All of these little gaps here are completely, you can sew through all of them. It's a really good reverse applique piece. That's what I mostly do with this one, is reverse applique. So I will cut out this, all of the black parts. All the black parts get cut out. And then whatever colors you choose, like this one is like a nice place for like a quilted one. I'll show you the colors I picked. So, put something like this that's textured in the middle, right? And then you have this yellow on the outside, underneath. It's so simple. This is a really good design. So that would be one that you should absolutely pick. Highly. That one's a really good one because it's got good line space. It's got good defined lines here that are bold and they're not too cramped. That's the kind of things that you should look for when you're doing your applique or reverse applique. You can put them both on a piece like I'm doing right here. There we go. So that's a really great start, and it shows how you can take something that looks really difficult and boil it down to, oh, I don't have to cut out every tooth. I can just sew these down and I can draw it on with when I'm doing the sewing. That's a good idea. And then you can start doing the flowers, which if you want to edit out, like, if you look here, these are here. I'll grab one of the new ones. These are leaves that are on here. And if you don't want to do those, I think it's perfectly fine to edit those out. Maybe not on the one in the middle, but I think that you can definitely edit out some of those things if it all just gets too much. Otherwise, you can get these little pieces in here and then put them underneath the flowers after you cut them out. So there'll be two separate cuts. One's for the leaves and one's for the flowers, and then one for the middle part, which this one I would definitely use a hole punch on. As you can see, it's not as hard once you break it down into the bits. I hope that has helped some of you kind of try to tackle more difficult pieces, because it's infinitely doable. You just have to pick the right piece and the right template to go with it and keep at it, because I completely have faith that anyone can do this kind of work. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.